What's up guys, my name is Liam, and today we're going to be taking a look at the EspTiger Tang Dao. They have released a couple of different versions with different bases, so I'm going to do my best to kind of highlight those differences for you and ultimately help you decide which one of these might be the best option for you. So let's check it out. And before we get started today, I did want to let you know that these were all sent out to me by metkeys.com, so I'll go ahead and leave links down in the description below where you can check them out. But everything you're going to be hearing in this video today is going to be my own words and my own opinions. So starting out with the pink and the light blue versions, both of these are the exact same to one another. The only differences is going to be the color on the surface. Both of these versions come in at 480 millimeters by width, 400 millimeters by height, and they sit at 4 millimeters in thickness. They're using a Poron base with a mirror finish, and as far as the overall stickiness of the base itself goes, if you're using any type of a desk with any type of an aggressive texture on it, any type of wood grain or anything like that, this might not be the best option for you. Me myself, I have desks with laminated surfaces on them, so there's not a whole lot of texture. They do feel very smooth on top of the surface, and this thing is actually easy to slide around and move around on your desk. But once you get it planted, once I actually press into the pad, again, if you don't have any type of an aggressive texture, this will actually suction to the surface of your desk. So as long as you have a smoother desk, this would probably be the stickiest base out of all of them, because if you're able to suction it to your desk, the only way you're able to move it after that is you actually do have to peel it off the surface of your desk. So that is something to keep in mind if you are looking at picking up this version. This pink version of the Tang Dao was actually my first experience that I had with this mouse pad back when Addis Inc. sent me a care package of a bunch of different EspTiger mouse pads. So thank you, Addis Inc. for that. Shout out to you. One thing I do want to notice, however, especially with all these different types of colored versions of the Tang Dao that I noticed myself personally, is once you do originally get this out of the box, sometimes the top texture on the surface does feel a little bit more abrasive, and it does have a little bit more of a break-in period. I do remember when I started using the original version of this pink Tang Dao, even the newer version of the orange that I got, it did have a little bit more of that abrasive texture, and it does kind of increase the properties of both the dynamic and the static friction, and they feel a little bit slower. Even on this light blue one, I was comparing my pink one that I've had for a while that have nice and broken in. So I'll go and drop a glide test here. Here's when I got the blue one fresh out of the box. As you can see there, it was just a little bit slower. So that is a pretty common experience I had across the board. But once you get these broken in, it does have a little bit of a smoother glide. But aside from that, both of these pretty much have an identical performance along both the X and the Y axis. With this mirror finished Poron base, it does make the surface feel just a little bit more stiff than the orange version and even the black version on my copies. So I'll go ahead and I'll break that down here for you in just a little bit. But overall, these are still pretty plush. You can push into them, and the overall experience on the glide of these, it honestly feels really consistent once you do get them broken in. All right, so next up, when it comes to the Tang Dao, this says the SR base, but same thing, 480 millimeters in width by 400 millimeters in height, sits about 4 millimeters in thickness. And when it comes to this SCR base, this feels more familiar to something like a standard rubber base. Now, to me, this does feel a little bit more plush. I would say that the elastic properties of this, they do feel like they bounce back just a little bit quicker than the Poron. Again, not a huge difference here. Out of all of the different bases that are available in this Tang Dao, I do feel like this SCR base, if you're using any type of a high grain or a natural wood finish type of a desk, that this might be the best option and the most sticky out of all of them for you. All right, so next up, we're going to look at this orange Tang Dao. This has the 6 millimeter base with polyurethane foam. I found myself personally, if you're just gliding across the surface of all these pads, obviously they have the same surface, they're going to feel almost nearly identical to one another, but with the different properties of the base, it is actually going to change how this pad performs. And with this polyurethane base is where you really do start to notice a bit of a difference compared to the other versions. When looking at this base, it does have this texture on it. I do feel like it is a little bit more sticky than the Poron style bases, but it doesn't stick to my desk as good as the SCR base. The overall properties of this 6 millimeter polyurethane foam, it is plush and you can push into it, but once you do actually have your mouse on the surface, if you apply a lot of pressure, I don't feel like it sinks in like way too much as you kind of expect from probably a 6mm style base. But one thing I do want to note about this version of the pad is I experimented with a bunch of different types of mice. If you are using the bigger style skates, you really don't sink into this a whole lot. But if you're to use smaller style skates, like say for example on the Final Mouse ULX, with these smaller style skates up in each one of the corners, I do feel like that you can push into this pad a lot. You can get some sinkage there and you can actually scratch the bottom of your mouse, but that's only if you're being very aggressive with it. So I do feel like out of all the versions, again, when you're lighter on the surface of this, you're going to have that same typical type of glide speed along both the X and the Y axis as the other versions. But again, when you start really applying pressure on top of the mouse, this is going to have better stopping properties than the other versions, and it can slow it down a little bit depending on, again, just how much weight you're applying to your mouse as you're gliding it across the Y and the X axis. All right, and lastly, we have the original Tang Dao in black. This also has a Poron base, but it does feature a different diamond pattern base. So it is kind of more similar to something like the Lethal Gaming Gear Saturn Pro with the overall properties of the base itself. It does have a little bit of plushness to it, but I don't feel like it's too plush. It kind of does have a nice balance of being able to push into it, but at the same time offering a good sense of consistency. This was actually the last version of the Tang Dao that I was able to get my hands on, and I must say out of all of the different versions that I've used, this one kind of does feel the most familiar to me since I've put in a lot of hours on the Lethal Gaming Gear Saturn Pro. The overall performance of the Tang Dao, to me, it feels a little bit quicker than something like the Zowie GSR2, but in all honesty, the speed of these, they kind of fall right in line with the new version of the Lethal Gaming Gear Saturn Pro. And even though this black version and the pink and the light blue version are using a Poron style base, I do feel like overall, just in general, that this black version, for whatever reason, if I were to pull on the corner up here, it feels just like it's a little bit more plush, a little bit more loose, almost like the pad kind of has a little bit more movement to it as you're actually using the surface on here. Whereas with these other colored versions, if I were to do the same thing, put a lot of weight on here and pull up in the top corner, as you can see, there's not as much give there as there is on this black version. So overall, with these flatter Poron style bases and even with the SCR base, I do feel like you get a little bit more of a stiffer feeling surface when you're actually using it, and I do feel like you can slightly feel a little bit more on your glide. So for me, this black version just feels like a little bit more loose and just a little bit more open, whereas these feel like they're just a little bit tighter in the overall grain as you're making your glide across the surface. And if I were to bring the SCR version in here and try and do the same thing, as you can kind of see, as a little bit more of that stiffer feeling just all around, not just with the base, but overall with the surface as well. And the one thing about this orange version is it does kind of have that stiffer feeling to it as well. But again, just with the plushness of the 6mm, just when you're actually pushing into the surface itself, it does feel the most plush, and I would almost say the most spongy out of all these different versions. So at the end of the day, I know it's a question that a lot of people are going to be asking me just based on my personal preference, and I'll be completely honest with you guys, all these pads are great, and I truly have enjoyed using all of them. If you were to force me to pick my favorites just off the top of my head and based off of my experiences with how I play and how I've been using them, I would probably put the black version as my #1 pick, but then I would probably put the pink and the light blue versions as a very close second. I do still really enjoy using these, and again, I do kind of like how it has almost a little bit more of the stiffer surface. All right, guys, so I really hope that I did somewhat of a decent job trying to explain the differences of these to you. If you feel like I left anything out or you have any additional questions, please let me know down in the comments below. And again, if you are interested in picking these up, I have left affiliate links down in the description if you are interested in supporting the channel. If you've enjoyed watching this video, please drop a like and subscribe to my channel, and thank you so much for watching. I look forward to seeing you in the next one.